Hey there, nice to see you. Always nice to have you with us on the Bronx Buzz. This is Bronx Night's program where we talk to reporters, writers, journalists, editors, authors, and I said that deliberately, and novelists. And we also, in our second segment, talk to writers and people who are doing videographers and filmmakers and artists and other people who put stuff out in the Bronx. So this is going to be a really interesting show. All our shows are interesting because we have a novelist, a speechwriter, an author, a storyteller, and a Bronxite. And that is Peter Quinn. And nice to have you with us, Peter.
Thank you, Gary. It's great to be here.
Let's just talk about now. There are two books we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about this is the most recent, right?
That's the memoir that came out in September.
So Across Bronx, A Writing Life. I wanted to ask you a general thing about being a writer. We'll talk about some of your past and the history and the speech writing, which is so significant. When moving about and living your life, how much of it is just living, or are you kind of always like looking at stuff and writing the book and saying, oh yeah, that'll work for my book, or gee, I had that interaction, maybe, then you're sitting on the bus or the subway or you're driving home and you're saying, that should be written about. How much of it is separate and how much of it is just, that's why I'm able to write the book, because I lived it.
Well, I never go around thinking that this is going to be part of the book. And, I wasn't educated as a writer. I didn't know any writers growing up in the Bronx. It was a kind of foreign occupation to me. I came to it late. I'd never written a novel. I sat down and I never went to a novel writing course. I started reading books by novelists I admired, writing out paragraphs, and that's how I learned to write novels. But I never really go around with a notebook saying, I want to put that scene in the book. But most of it is in my head. Like, I think I worked at for 2 governors and 5 chairmen of Time Warner. So I saw a lot of sausage being made, as Bismarck said, see sausage being made. And all of that comes out in the books. I mean, I think the more experience you have, the better writer you are.
Let's just a little perspective on what you have seen. And I've got this quote here: New York City isn't so much a setting as it is a character.
Right.
Maybe I'm going to substitute the words the Bronx instead of New York City isn't so much a setting. And I've asked many, many artists and writers about this sort of thing. How does the Bronx, aside from the subject matter, I mean, it's called the Cross Bronx, aside from the subject matter, how does the Bronx character play in your writing and in kind of the personality of what you're writing about?
Well, I think that the Bronx grounds you. You grow up around people who will tell you what they think of you right away. There's a lot of in your face. There's not a lot of pretense. There were no.
And you can't have thin skin, I'll tell you that.
Right. There were no snobs where I grew up. It was all kind of reality based, if that's something to say. William Kennedy once was talking about. He said there's a cynical humanism that people have who grow up in cities. And I would say, I saw great kindness in the Bronx. I also saw Bronxites suspect power. They don't bow to it. There's always like, who does he think he is? And he thinks his, doesn't smell. So I always love that about being the Bronx. You're upfront about things. That's what I think. And I wrote 3 detective novels with the character Fenton Dunn, who grows up after the Bronx. And he was kind of, to me, the embodiment of the Bronx. He's like tough. But inside, he's decent. I always felt that about the Bronx, that people in the Bronx were really decent.
That you can be tough and still be a decent person.
Right.
I just want to ask you about kind of about the writing process. Now, you brought it up. I mean, I was certainly going to mention that you were a speechwriter for Governor Carey. I got it here, 1975 to 1982. He was governor. And then you worked for Governor Mario Cuomo and wrote the historic speech that he gave at the Democratic National Convention. In the way that you have to write those things, compared to trying to write a novel, do you have to like literally get yourself in a room and lecture yourself and say, wait a minute, that's not what I'm writing now. That's what I've got to and reorient your actual whole state of mind, or are you frankly talented enough to just say, well, okay, now I'm writing this, now I'll write this?
I'm untalented enough to I always, I knew a real old New York press guy, Mike Patterson, said, there are only two kinds of writing, good and bad. And I never like switched into a different mode. People always said, how do you find their voice? I don't find their voice. I just write the best I can. I do listen to them, but I'm not like writing scripts for people who I feel I'm writing for myself. I feel, this is something I could give or would give. And at the same time, and there's a context, you can't use certain things for certain people. I knew somebody who was almost fired from a studio job for putting Flaubert in a speech. And the guy pronounced it Flaubert. It was like, what the hell are you putting this in? So, yeah, it's realistic. Writing is hard. That's what people don't understand. It's really hard. And it's very isolating. You go in a room and, people used to say to me at Time Warner, when I retire, I'm going to do what you do. And I would say, oh, yeah, you're going to go in the attic and drive a nail in your head?
Right, exactly.
But full-time job.
You're a very detailed writer. I mean, you write intricately. Right. In other words, certainly in terms of the way this is written compared to other books. I got many of them around me of people who've been on the show, and we'll get yours up here as well. Something conscious, or that is just your style, and I'm sticking to it, so to speak.
Yeah, well, it's part of my training. I was trained as a historian. That's what I wanted to be.
Yes, that's right.
And I did a lot of writing articles. I was working for a doctorate, and it was always get into the facts, detail things. And I became a novelist, but I kept that grounding as a historian. And there's so much. One thing when I want to do research, I always found it difficult to get out of research because it's so interesting. The deeper you go into it, the more you find. It's like a rabbit hole. And for writers, research is great because you're always looking for an excuse not to write. And research is a great excuse. When I was writing Banished Children at one point, I went down the rabbit hole for about 6 months on plumbing, indoor plumbing.
That is this book right here.
600-page novel. It took me 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to me the style of writing, because I mean I work every day in this media, and I know the difference between writing for TV versus, let's say, writing if I was writing a news story about something. So let's just talk about this. One of the things that came up, I believe, in an interview with you that I looked through, and somebody had said, how do you know when you're done? And you talked just now about how you researched, tremendously, how do you write a 600-page novel? How do you know when you're done? And I've asked this question to many artists as well, people who do paintings. It's like, one more. Oh, that's it. I'm done. How do you know that? How do you know with research that you're done? Or do you it's
a Supreme Court judge said, I don't know. I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. It's like you just know, you bring it to some sort of finish. That's a hard thing, to write endings to stuff.
This Cross Bronx, A Writing Life, is your memoirs.
Right.
You're still alive. You're still you're remembering this. I mean, you'll remember everything. Do you think about, maybe there will be another, or do you not do that? I think it was John Lennon who said, I put things down on a piece of paper. When I have enough of them, I call it a book.
Well, I'll never stop writing, because William Kennedy once said to me, a definition of a writer is a person who writes.
Okay, that's fair.
So, and that's, I think of myself, that's what I am. It's not something I do on the side, and it's how I fill my day, and it's how I find a lot of satisfaction and frustration. So I finished this memoir. I've started another novel. I'm 75.
You have started another novel.
Yeah, I can't help myself anymore. Please stop me before I read another novel. That's what I want to tell some people. But it's a great way to pass the day, and
or pass a lot of days.
Yeah, and I wrote these detective novels, and one was set in New York and Berlin in '38. And I didn't go to Berlin, but I went to the New York Public Library and got all the guidebooks from the '36 Olympics. Wow. And it was a great kind of mental adventure, right? I was in my office but I was in Berlin. I actually went to Berlin when I finished the book because I knew the Berlin of '36
Wow.
wasn't there.
Yeah,
I just
right.
wanted
And
to
you
see if I got it right.
and doing that, of course, gives you a perspective. You had brought this up just a moment ago, and I had it in the back of my mind in preparation for this. Um, as a speechwriter, how much of it is looking at Mario Cuomo and saying, I'm going to write his words,
Right.
or you writing your words and having him repeat them,
Yeah.
and or do you find a balance? How do you make that determination when writing for somebody else like that, as opposed to writing your own memoirs?
Yeah. Well, writing for Cuomo and Kerry, they were both they were articulate men who wanted to know what they were saying. I rarely handed him a script and said, you're going to read this. We worked on it, like the Notre Dame speech and the convention speech. I have it in the memoir. It was a long process. It wasn't like, there was a myth that he spent 5 hours in the governor's mansion writing the speech. Well, that wasn't true. We spent a week writing it and did all this testing of it.
Wow.
And, it was that ability to work together. There were other times I worked for other people. I just wrote the speech and they gave it. But Cuomo and Kerry was special. I think there's a special thing to politics. They have to move people much more than I did corporate speech writing for 20 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a way, they have to move people. They also have agendas maybe that you're not aware of. I mean, in terms of people that they have to keep happy, or
Right.
people
Yeah.
that they
Right.
quote unquote serve in some form or another,
Well,
or
I
people that
say,
they want to make sure to dig. I mean, it could be any, and I mean, as close as you might be to them, that might be a difficult thing.
yeah, well, the State of the State speech was always, it's a terrible speech, but you have to mention everybody, all these things. It's invariably it's like the State of the Union is a terrible speech.
Right.
Has a lot going against it, but something like Notre Dame or the keynote where you stand up and you're appealing to a national audience. It's kind of it's intimidating at the same time. You're trying to find a baseline that appeals to people.
We're almost out of time. I just want to remind people, check out Peter Quinn, the Cross Bronx, A Writing Life. I found some of myself in there, and I think that Bronx people will feel the same way. We didn't get really a chance to talk to Banished about this. You also have that 3-part trilogy that you referenced earlier. Look up author. There's somebody else named Peter Quinn, I think, in the Defense Department.
Oh, yeah, I think he's in jail, actually.
Oh, really? Well, then that's not the guy we're talking about, but look up Peter Quinn, author, and you'll get all these books. And
NewYorkPatty.com. They can get my website.
There you go. We'll put that up on the screen. Again, Cross Bronx, A Writing Life. Peter, thank you for doing all that writing and doing all that perspective on our homeland. And keep going. We'll keep reading.
Yeah. Viva El Bronx.
That's how we feel. Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to do a different kind of media, a reporter who does videos with elected officials doing things that you wouldn't expect elected officials to be doing. So don't go away.
Okay.
Feel the beat of nature at a park or forest near you. Find a forest and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org.
STEM is everywhere, like here, behind the scenes of The Walking Dead.
When we break down clothes, we tumble it with trisodium phosphate, rock salt, and dish detergent.
We stitched together images of our model and created a 3D set that can be walked through in a VR headset.
We're able to turn 12 walkers into 1,000 walker boards.
STEM can create new worlds on and off the screen. What will you make with STEM? Get inspired at shecanstem.com.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
All right, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. That was great. He's a tremendous writer, as you could tell. I mean, he writes anything. It doesn't matter whether it's a speech. We didn't get a chance to talk about the plays that he's written. He's done all kinds of things. So thanks to Peter Quinn for joining us right now. Although I'm thrilled because my friend Skye Ostreicher is with us. She is the Political Personalities with Skye host. Nice to see you, Skye. Nice to have you with us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Now, people may or may not know that you do Political Personalities with Skye for City and State New York. This is a video series. We're going to show a clip that's going to blow people's minds. But tell us a little bit about how it came about and how you came to be political personalities with Skye.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me. And it's a lot of fun. I have this big smile on my face because what I do is I get to know our elected officials and community leaders outside of their work in politics. Typically, when we see these decision makers in the news, it's because there's a tragedy in their district or there's a controversial piece of legislation pending. And we rarely get to know the insights into how they think, how they feel, and what they're working on, maybe some personal stuff about their family lives. And it's with those personal details, right? That's how you make a friend. That's how you meet an acquaintance. That's how you build relationships. So it's by knowing some of those personal details that I think can help us move the city forward.
And one of the things that I particularly like, and we are going to show a sample of that, is that you participate in these activities pretty actively. Now, it wasn't a Bronx elected official, but I don't remember the name of the, I guess it was a Manhattan official that you went and got a tattoo with.
Yep.
I don't want to ask, can we see the tattoo?
Yeah.
Or is it in a place? Oh, wait, here we go.
I'm going to show you. This is the tattoo I got. It's a microphone.
A microphone. Wow, look at that.
I got it with Councilmember Skye Ostreicher from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
And what this does is it really provides a perspective on them as people outside of their campaign, outside of all the other things that you just described.
Right, exactly. And other electeds have said to me that it helps them work better together, knowing a little bit about each other.
Oh.
I went with Justin Brannan in Brooklyn. I went and met his mom. There are different things. There are different things that I've done with people. So it's so cool.
Do you ask them, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself, or do you go on rumor that, oh, somebody mentioned that, whatever?
No, I asked them to tell me, and that's how I learned that Senator Natalia Fernandez was born at home. She told me the story of her dad delivering her out of her mother in the bathroom. These are like, when else would she be able to share that story?
She has been on our program a number of times about issues, and also I think she's debated at least twice on our program. It never would have occurred to me to bring that up, but what a fascinating story. What an amazing story. I'd be curious to know if it was in a Bronx apartment. Who knows?
Yeah.
So let's see. I took special note of the Bronx elected officials. Council member Althea Stevens, you walked around the NABE on Sedgwick Avenue, which is not too far from where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
where hip-hop was created.
Exactly. We've been hearing about the Hip Hop Museum, just broke ground recently. That's going to open. There's a bunch of people on the board. They've been making some buzz about that Hip Hop Museum, but Althea Stevens took me to the Sedgwick Avenue, the birthplace of hip hop. So learning about that, the history.
And you walked with Gustavo Rivera on Arthur Avenue. Now that was interesting because that did not used to be his district, right? That was a place that was added to his district. Do I have that right?
No, I think it's always been in his district, and they were with redistricting.
That's
the
what I meant.
Changed a little bit, yeah. So it does get confusing, but again, it's like it doesn't matter which pieces are in his district or not. It's the whole neighborhood knows of him and wants to hear a little bit more about his personal story.
I had to laugh at that one because I think somewhere toward the beginning you said he didn't want to do a selfie or anything like that. That guy loves being on camera, and I've had him on. So you can't fool me with that. And then one of the other Bronx things, we're going to show a video you did with Kenny Burgos in a moment.
Oh, great.
One of the other ones you did was you went up to the Northeast Bronx at the YMCA for the March Madness basketball tournament.
Yeah.
That's interesting because the elected officials play ball against each other.
Right, exactly. So that's an event I do with City and State, and Kenny Burgos is on our cover this week. The City and State magazine is the cover man of the Albany 40 Under 40. But the March Madness basketball tournament, that was the first one we did last year at the Northeast Bronx YMCA. And again, it was an opportunity for people to see elected officials moving and playing ball against each other, not in the legislative chambers, but on the courts of the YMCA, Northeast Bronx YMCA. So that was a great opportunity as well to showcase elected officials outside of politics.
Did you get the sense that once they stepped on the basketball court, that all political pretensions dripped away, and all of a sudden what emerged was how they were when they were in junior high school and high school learning to
And it's
play.
funny. It's funny because we had Charles Smith from the New York Knicks, a former Knicks player, came to observe the game and make some comments. And he said that there's a lot you can tell about kids. He watches kids play basketball all the time. There's a lot you can tell about people by the way they play basketball. You can tell what their sportsmanship qualities are, who's a leader, who's a follower. So it was just interesting to have Charles Smith from the New York Knicks make that comment about elected officials playing basketball.
Let's do the Kenny Burgos thing. Let's show that first before we run out of time. So I'm just going to say it, and I was blown away. I know Kenny reasonably well. He debated on our program before he was elected, and he's a bodybuilder, and he looks pretty good. I mean, he's in shape.
Yeah. And between the time we filmed that video and now, he's lost 40 pounds. Because, you know, when you're weight training, you have to bulk up and then cut. It's, you know, all this terminology that these guys do.
So the marriage between that and what he does for a living, you walk through a supermarket with him and he talked about the things that he eats to get to where he is. So that's where we're going to pick this up. This is Skye Ostreicher in the supermarket. With Kenny Burgos talking about eating well so that you can be a bodybuilder. Let's take a look.
I want to ask you, have you always been conscious of your diet, or is this something that happened later on in your life?
So I joined the wrestling team in high school, and pretty much that kind of kick-started everything in my life today. You know, learn about weight training, learn about eating right, and so it's been about a decade of just trying to be conscious of how we eat, try to be healthy as I can, and always getting better.
How do you stay so strict when you have such a crazy schedule?
Believe it or not, making sure I'm on point with diet and keeping to that regimen keeps me sane and really helps me be effective in everything else, right? When my meals are planned out, when I know I'm eating the entire day, everything else is easy. I'm not worried about, you know, what the next meal is or what, you know, what I'm gonna do for dinner. That's done. That's a big thing most people think about, right? Like, you're like, what am I gonna have for dinner tonight? What am I gonna make?
Okay.
I already know what I'm gonna have every single day. So it's like, the worst is done.
Okay. Learned about what Assembly member Kenny Burgos puts in his cart at the supermarket, and now I think he's going to take us for a little bit of a workout to show us some of the moves that he trained for in the bodybuilding competition.
So any given back day, always gonna deadlift. Pump it up.
We're not all bodybuilders like you, Kenny. You thought I could deadlift 90 pounds? Not happening. I need to get back into working out. Who works out harder than you in the assembly?
Who works out harder than me? I'll be a little bit cocky. I don't think anyone does.
All right, there you go. Should I ask how many pounds that was that you picked
I don't
up?
know, 40 pounds. The truth is, I never rejoined the gyms after the pandemic.
I have to tell you, there's something absolutely priceless about seeing that. I mean, obviously I moderate all the debates and stuff, and I know Kenny Burgos very well through that prism. That's how I've seen him. But seeing him there in the supermarket, and you are a ready and willing participant. It's just fantastic. Is there somebody or something that you saw that, I mean, all these are striking, that blew you away? I mean, that blows me away and we didn't show it, but Kenny's body is really fit. I mean, you just can't even imagine it. But is there something that really shocked you or surprised you, or the one thing that stands out of everything? Now, how long have you been doing this, by the way?
No, I've been doing this for a year and a half now.
A year and a half, wow.
And I spent most of my career working in government affairs, getting to know a lot of these players. And then it wasn't until the pandemic when I was locked inside. We all were. And I reached out to our local officials and I said, will you spend a few minutes with me on Zoom and tell me what's going on? So that's how this idea was created in March 2020. And City and State's the third media company that I'm working with. And now the episodes are in person. And with Kenny, you could always tie it back to someone's agenda and realizing how they think as a legislator. Like with Kenny, he's talking about the mind-body connection. That you can go into mental health and talk about healthy eating in the Bronx. Like there's so many things. Now you understand how he legislates and what's top of mind for him. But, I learned Assemblyman Mike Durso, he's from Long Island, but he spent 15 years working as a sanitation worker. He was a garbage man for 15 years before he was elected into the New York State Legislature. And he asked me to meet him at 4:00 in the morning, and we did a garbage route together around the Bay, and he gave me
Sorry, it really is kind of funny.
Right? Like, who would ever have known that he was a garbage man? Like, when does that come up?
I suppose if he wanted to campaign as a man of the people, so to speak, but it probably gives him a pretty good perspective on cleanliness in his neighborhood and his district. It probably gives him, I'm guessing, an environmental slant to, his advocacy. Does any politics ever get in the way of it? Like, oh no, I don't want to talk about that because that's what I voted against last year, that kind of thing. Or does not come up because you're just dealing with personality stuff?
Well, even like the time it did, right? Like Vicky
We
Palladino.
only got, I see we got about a minute left or something. So go ahead.
I can give an example of Vicky Palladino, the councilwoman from Queens.
Okay.
That she said some things, she's conservative. So she said some things that upset some of her progressive colleagues in the council. So my question to her was, from a personality perspective, does this inhibit the way that you're able to work across the aisle with your colleagues when you say things that offend them? So that's how
you stumbled into it.
It's all personality driven, right? Because at the end of the day, that's how we move New York City forward, is by collaborating across the aisle and working together.
Mm-hmm. You specifically stick to New York City. Well, no, you mentioned Long Island, so it's New York State, or it's just
upstate. I've gone upstate. I did a video with Senator Pete Harcum, the chair of the Senate Environment Committee up in the Hudson Valley. So I've traveled around for this.
Is there anything that we need to know upcoming, and where should we tell people to see it? The City and State New York, I presume?
Yep, the City and State website. I have a link there, Political Personalities with Skye, and I put everything on my Instagram where I am the political personality.
Wow. Listen, I think it's great. I loved all of the ones that I saw. People who are interested in Bronx politics, this is a perspective that you hadn't thought about. And congratulations to Skye Ostreicher for thinking about it and actually having the guts to go do it. She's got the print to prove it. And I don't know, did you get back to work out yet like you promised? No.
I know. I have to.
We all need to do that. Listen, Skye, it's a pleasure. And when you have some more, especially Bronx people, let us know. We'll find a space for you.
Thank you so much.
Great. So that will do it, ladies and gentlemen, for this evening's Bronx Buzz. We thank two great personalities. We had Peter Quinn and Skye Ostreicher. And you know what I always say? We'll see you next week. Good night.